Hey everyone. Heavier topic today. You can probably guess why, given the week it is. But I want to address something that it used to come up all the time in the media. I think it still does, but I think it also has a pretty clear answer, and that is what causes somebody to become a public killer in this case, or mass killer in other situations? What is the psychology of such a person? Can we learn anything about the profile of this person? Now, a pretty pernicious narrative has been brewing, you could say, for a long time, trying to find another group besides the 1% that are actually controlling our lives that's about the same proportion of total people to blame everything on. And that 1% of the population is, of course, trans people. Now, of course, you have a strong opinion already, but how many trans people do you even know? The problem is that when somebody is sparse enough that they can and excluded enough that they can plausibly not be encountered, it makes it a lot easier to demonize those people. And I wanted to come on here because I was having a conversation throughout this week and after the incident with a good friend of mine, heart in the right place, but normal rural guy, works as a security guard, you know what I'm saying? And I know that he was sad. I was shocked. Because I knew he was a fan of Charlie Kirk, so I was the one who I'm sure I wasn't the first person, but he was the first one that I messaged and was just like shock emoji, I wasn't for it. I don't think it's a good thing. And every time that there is a shooting, the media instantly wants to blame this non-existent entity, the far left. I mean, you've heard me talk about it in other videos. There is no left wing in America. And I know that probably sounds crazy, but in the grand scheme of things, Democrats are a center-right party. They're super pro-business, they're super pro-corporate, they're super pro-concentration of wealth and power and elitism, but also liberal democracy. I mean, come on. That's why they're not your saviors, and so right. I remember that when Luigi Mangione happened, I remember making the comment to my wife before we knew who he was that, well, this wasn't a leftist. I mean, a lot of people can be scarred from the health industry, and leftists, because they are materialists, because they are historical materialists, understand that violence begets violence, that violence against authority is going to be met with massive repression, and also that any instance that can be picked up on and extrapolated for eternity of a despicable act, can just be used forever. So I think genuinely left-wing people, they understand this. They're not going out and shooting people. And sure enough, Luigi Mangione is a privileged guy who was just spurred by the system, back problems or whatever. I guess we don't have the full picture, but he's not a leftist. And even to the extent that there is any truth to trans shooters, trans people aren't intrinsically leftists either. So getting back to my friend, I thought, because his reaction was, and I think unprompted, I think before Trump's reaction of threatening civil war, he's already made his own video where he's basically saying, guys, you got to be careful, what this is going to lead to, hinting at the whole civil war narrative, which, by the way, invoking a civil war is one of those stages of fascism to keep us distracted while they're crashing the entire economy. So, not a good look. But anyway, because of that rhetoric, and before we even knew who it was, I thought it was really important when it came out the guy was a Trump voter, and he was this, basically Groyper MAGA type, that, I sent that to him. I'm like, this is important, especially because, he was saying things to me like people shouldn't be killed for their opinions, I want you to be consistent with that across the board, because he was saying things like Charlie Kirk just shared his opinion, and I want to be able to share my opinion too, without people flipping out about it. So I was trying to bring the temperature down, but his response is, no, that's not true at all. it's still part of the trans radical agenda because his roommate was transgender. And of course, we're still finding out more about this story. But guys, it's not mutually exclusive to have a trans person in your life and be a bigot elsewhere. Like, the trans person isn't necessarily enough to get someone to change their beliefs on their own, just as much as the beliefs on their own aren't necessarily enough to keep someone from being someone else's friend. Okay? And that leads me to, is there an epidemic of trans shooters specifically? Because if you go and look, I mean, you do have to comb a little bit because the Wikipedia page, it doesn't like list clear motive as like one of the columns. But having paid attention to this for a long time, most mass shooters are young white Republican men. Sorry, that is true. There's a lot of misinformation that gets out there. 9 out of 10 times, the people who go and shoot up mosques, synagogues, black churches, black areas, these are all people who are a very particular combination of things. They're young white men who have been radicalized with a very authoritarian and violence-driven ideology. Now, I think the easy answer, sorry, I'm trying to keep the sun out a little bit. I think the easy answer, and you'll probably hear some liberals talking about this, is like that, you know, people who are spurred by the system might want to seek vengeance on the system, and we live in such a transphobic culture that a trans person could be spurred enough, motivated enough to lash out. And this misses the point entirely, because this is not equally represented across all demographics. It is the unique combination of historic, and it can, so as a result continue to this day, systemic privilege and a victim complex to rival anybody else's. Okay, I'm going to move this. Sorry, there's only like one stump that's like the right height and comfortable to sit on. But so here's the important point. No, it's not the people who have been marginalized their entire life, kicked out of their families, kicked out of their social circles, killed themselves because there wasn't access to treatment or a society that accepted them. These people are not the ones running society. I hope that's obvious. I mean, it's not. But when we talk about trans, there's two things. There's actual trans people who are just people living their lives. And then there's this idea of transness, this idea that it is the embodiment of evil, the thing that is going to cause everything to, you know, disappear. And the reason why I think trans in particular is so transgressive, no pun intended, in patriarchal America is specifically because it undermines patriarchy itself. It undermines gender. If you can change your gender, then biological essentialism is out the window, you know? And you have to recognize reality for what it is, which is a spectrum. And so because that's very hard to let go of, because these people want to continue to live in the world where men are intrinsically better and women just magically take care of things in a superhuman way somehow, but they're still inferior somehow, right? What is this? We need to be able to move past this. And it is specifically the combination of the entitlement, the idea that you as a white guy are supposed to have all this power and are supposed to show your worth by being violent, are supposed to arm yourself to the teeth and be able to do all these acts of cruelty, combined with an insane victim complex, pressuring more and more young people of this intersection to try to do something radically violent in order to reclaim their identity. Fight Club style. I mean, come on, this is what the movie was actually, I mean, whatever. It's kind of about a lot of things. It's kind of about both sides in it, to be honest, pulling people in who can read whatever they want into it. But this leads us back to the trans people because, so like I looked up a recent one and he said that the trans ideology had brainwashed them and ruined their life. Okay. If they actually had just tried being trans and then it turns out they weren't, they would just go back to living. But they didn't do that. They were trans. That's why they overcame the social pressures and stigma in the first place, to get out there and to make those changes, to feel better about themselves. And when they had to go back and when they had to try to convince themselves that that was evil, they went crazy and had to lash out so that other people can feel the way they do. Because this is the heart of the psychology of people who commit acts of mass violence, they are reenacting trauma that they have experienced, almost always. And our culture is traumatizing our citizens. It's true. You're kind of right when you say that guns aren't necessarily the problem, because it is also this culture of manhood through violence and shutting down gender expression because it threatens that image of masculinity. So even the trans shooters are actually white guys who are Republicans and hate themselves. Anyway, this is the moral of the story, but I hope that maybe some of it made sense, especially if you disagree. I really actually like pressing these points, these Charlie Kirk points, Did you really like that he was able to just talk to anybody about their ideas? Did you really like that he would just debate anybody, platform anybody, and have any conversation and just want to share his opinion? Extend that to me. I'll remind you to be extending it to me, because every single conservative friend that I have says that they have opinions from both sides, but then they freak out when I share things that are truly left-wing. Chill out, okay? You don't have to accept it. I think that I think it's so obvious that left ideologies are better for people in general, that you have to create these elaborate ideas about how hellish, over the top bad things like socialism are, just so that people don't do the logical thing, which is to be more efficient. Socialism is more economically efficient. The other thing you guys might be right about is that trans ideology does cause violence. But the way that you're wrong is it's not the pro-trans ideology causing the violence. It's the anti-trans ideology. Anyway, I just wanted to share these few thoughts. Leave yours in the comments below and try to have a constructive conversation if you can. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.